Okay, so thank you for coming to Crafting a Language Partner with Flutter and AI. Yeah, I've been working in Flutter since about 2019. It's not my primary job anymore, but when I first started at Splash in 2019, we built like a music maker in it, and I do love it as a technical solution, and I'll swing back to that. I also have a podcast with my friend and colleague, Pat, and as a shameless self-promotion, if I go to the right place, where's my mouse cursor? There we go. If you actually want some context on where this idea came about and why I started working on it, episode 7, Pat and I actually dive into motivations, and yeah, this is kind of the technical successor to that talk, which was more around bootstrapping and indie hacking and ideas like that. So check it out and subscribe. Okay, last self-promotion. So I currently am back at Splash so I work as a contractor, I have my own consulting company, but I spend most of my time at Splash, and we're working on the next generation of music, generative music. So input a text prompt, get out music, sometimes unique, sometimes not at the moment because of limitations of technology. But I recommend checking it out, pro.splashmusic.com, if you just like playing with music and seeing where the industry is at. All right. Now let's actually get into it. And so I wanted to understand the room a little bit, see if I can tailor to your levels of understanding. So can I get a quick show of hands with your left hand who has experience building an app in Flutter? So you're comfortable creating a new project and getting in and running it on a device. All right, good. And keep that hand up. And now with your other hand, raise it if you have experience using the OpenAI APIs. Okay, cool. Now, is that mainly for chat? Yeah? Okay, cool. That's good. So this will be familiar for all of you. Okay, so the next one I wanted to just get a gauge on is who here, as an adult, has tried to learn a second language? Why are you even here? Okay, and so keep your hand up if you've been successful in learning that second language. Yeah, define successful would be you can maintain a conversation. Yeah. Okay, and also keep your hand up if you did that in a country that doesn't speak that language. So if you're in Australia and you're learning Spanish, for example. Okay, so for those of you who have tried to learn a language as an adult, how hard is it when you want to go and speak to somebody when you're early days, right? Because I don't know if you're like me, I freeze up. I forget everything I've learned, and then I stumble, and then I don't want to waste their time because I'm like stumbling through my words. This is really where the motivation for this type of project came from. It's like, I want something to get me from 0, no spoken language, to 1. Enough spoken language so that when I come across that person in the street or I meet them, I can use enough of that language and start having a conversation and stumbling the way through. And so I think this is where AI really shines, because as a learning tool, it can bridge a gap that can be hard for you to bridge. It's not meant to replace human interaction, but it's meant to give you a leg up so that you can learn faster and be better. And so, yeah, so this was the motivation for this. It's like, how can we bridge the gap from 0 to 1 when learning a language, especially when you don't live in the country? Like, so I'm learning Portuguese at the moment. My wife is Colombian. That's how I learned Spanish. I don't have any Portuguese speakers at home. And so I wanted somebody that I could practice with. All right, so I'm doing something dumb in this, and I'm gonna actually write code. But okay, I really wanted to actually do this all from scratch, like 0 to working application in 20 minutes. And I tried and I practiced, and it was just not possible. So I had to reduce the scope of what was possible within the scope of the talk. We're still going to run it and go through step by step. But I really wanted to nail home just how incredible this is, that we could build a language partner that speaks and understands 57 languages. We can run it on 7 platforms. Using only 3 API calls and less than 300 lines of code. And we can actually solve a real problem, like make it functional.
I couldn't build that in 20 minutes.
And like, it sounds insane, but when I was doing this talk, I'm like, this is actually really simple. I don't know if this is like a technical enough talk for this audience, but we are here and we'll see how we go. But what also blows my mind is like with the current AI revolution, it's really easy for us to get desensitized to just how crazy good these technologies are now. Like I did a linguistics undergrad degree, and like we dreamt of natural language processing and how you could interact with machines and use them for language learning. And like 12 months ago, this was not possible. And now we're literally going to, in less than 300 lines of code, create something that you can talk to. So I think that's my slides. So let's get into some code. And so let's hope it doesn't fall apart. So I'll just start running it. And so where I had to reduce the scope was I've already got a Flutter project set up, but I've tried to use as bare bones as possible. So I used the standard Flutter create with the counter app template. The only thing I've done in terms of setup is I pulled out the chat page from the main.dart and just renamed it. And when it runs, you can see I've still got the fab down the bottom, but I've changed this to a list, added a little helper up the top for while we're working, and then added a few of the helper classes along the way. So in terms of the project structure, the other one was permissions. You need to remember to turn microphone permissions on Android and iOS in the manifest. Because that's always fun. So I've actually made sure that the simulator I'm using already has permissions, so I didn't have to worry about it during a talk. All right, so we're going to do all of our work in the chat page, basically in one function. And again, there's 4 parts to what we need to do and 3 API calls. So I wanted to show off some of Dart's new language features that came out in Dart 3 while we're at this. So I'll start at the top. So this chat message is the new record types. And so Dart records are very similar to TypeScript records, if you've got any experience with that. I find the syntax a little bit awkward. And so I just have to remind myself that it's like function syntax, except there's no function attached to it. So it's just the fact that you have to have like a parentheses and curly braces. I always find that a little bit complicated, but you get used to it when you use it enough. And the other one is I'm using hooks for state management. And I wanted to touch on that briefly because hooks is a very React thing, but I do a lot of React. And I like having a portable mental model when switching between projects to reduce the scope of how much I need to context switch. And so hooks is brilliant for simple to medium complexity state management within a component. And they work almost exactly the same as in React, but they're even less foot gunny. Like hooks in React can really shoot you in the foot bad if you don't understand what's going on. Whereas Dart as a language and the way it handles equality and things like that actually make it easier. So I'm using hooks. And as a little bit of scaffolding, I've got this used list, which uses, again, a record type. And a whole lot of funky syntax there. That was all auto-generated. But when you're using hooks, you need to have an immutable list effectively and replace the pointer each time. So that, because it's the pointer change, which then causes the re-render. And so that used list is just some helper functions on top of it. All right, so we're going to do our work in this block, which is the onFab pressed. I'll just quickly jump down to where that's used. So this is the other one of Dart 3 syntax that they released, and that's switch statements. I also found this syntax really, just tripped over it a lot. Again, you get used to it. But the idea is, for enum classes and also for sealed classes, which you get with Dart 3, it just makes it easy to obviously switch on a state and change between the different widgets. And so here we're just switching between obviously recording, stop, and documentation, and a circular progress indicator when we're working. All right, so enough explanation. Now let's get into it. So the idea here is we've got 4 things we need to do. We need to record audio. We need to turn that audio into text. We need to then generate conversation, and then take that conversation and turn that into speaking. And so that's what we're going to do. So this is where I started cheating. So I need a directory here. So instead of having to type it all out, I used live templates to auto-populate code for me so I didn't make typos. So I'll go through each of it, each part as we go. So this is giving me an application, like a place to store my recording files using the path provider package. And I'm just putting them straight into the application documents directory. That works cross-platform, which is nice. All right, and then we're going to need to start recording. One of the reasons this is so easy is because of the ecosystem that has developed around Flutter. Like the fact that the recording, like I think I'm using Flutter Recorder, maybe is the name of the package, but it works. It's just easy. It handles permissions built in, and I can record to a file, get a handle back, and play that using the audio players library. It's just easy. So here I'm adding to my list. This is one of the beauties of record types. Again, I don't have to declare what the name of the type is when I'm adding it. I do find the double parentheses, again, a little bit like brain bendy. Like, again, you get used to it. All right, so here we are. We're just adding a chat message, setting it to recording, starting the recording, and we'll also do recording stop as well. All right. I'm probably going to need to, oh yeah, I set that to processing. And then when we finish, let's just set it back to idle. All right, this is milestone 1. So let's test it. I've hot reloaded that. All right, moment of truth, everybody. Hello, this is a test. All right, and hello, this is a test. All right. Oh, yes. We got sound as well. Woo! All right. That's half my nerves going right now. I just had a feeling sound wasn't going to work, or practicing is one of the reasons the live templates are great. I would make a typo every time and then have to spend 15 minutes debugging because I'm like rushing through trying to get it done in 20 minutes. Yes, so live templates for the win. Okay, so we've got step 1. We've now got audio. So now we need to turn that into text. And for that, we can use the OpenAI create transcription API call. Now, the OpenAI client in Flutter is not official, but it is really well done. Ooh, that's not. Oh, okay, so I need to grab a message.audio path. What have we got wrong here? See? Ah, good call. Thank you. .io. Oh, who was that? Yes, thank you. Yeah. I was panicked. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? All right, so the Whisper model, has anybody used the Whisper model? Just quick show of hands. It blew me away, right? So Pat actually introduced me to the Whisper model in one of his projects. But like you can speak to it in multiple languages in the same sentence, and it will normally get it right. Like, so you could start in English and throw in, a Spanish word or whatever. And so from a language learning perspective, it's amazing because you can treat it like your bilingual friend, where it's like, how do I say dance in Spanish? Or say, ¿cómo se dice dance en español? And so you can do that, and we'll do a demo of it, but it understands and get 57 languages. So this is almost better than having a native speaker around because it has unlimited patience. And it knows all of the words for everything, and it knows grammar as well. So if you want to know grammar rules, it'll tell them to you. Whereas you ask a native speaker what a grammar rule is, and they're like, I don't know. Like, what's the subjunctive mean? My wife looks at me going, I do not know what subjunctive is. I've never heard that word in my life. All right, so I'll stop rambling. Okay, so we have a response, and then we just update our message and set it back to idle. Okay, all right. So, ¿cómo se dice dance en español? And so you can see, right? It's started in Spanish, thrown in an English word, and continued on in Spanish. It does struggle a little bit if your accent's a bit out. So my Portuguese that I'm learning at the moment has a very Spanish accent. And so oftentimes it'll actually translate it to Spanish for me. And like, I don't want that. I'm trying to learn Portuguese here. But for languages that are quite different in terms of accent, it works really well. Okay, so we've done transcription. We have text. So now we need to generate conversation. So we've done one API call. So this is API call 2. And so I think I called it GF chat. Okay. Excellent. So now we're going to go back. I'm just using 3.5 Turbo because it's fast. Generally for language learning, 4 is much better. And especially 4 Turbo, which has an enormous context window, so you can maintain a conversation for longer periods of time. But 4 will stay in the right language more often as well, instead of defaulting back to English or getting lost in the weeds because of recency bias. But for the purposes of here, 3.5 is fast, and so we're just using that one. And it does work. It's just, yeah, again, not as well, and you have more times where kind of, yeah, you have to start again. Now, for those of you who haven't used the OpenAI chat API, one of the things that really got me when I started this was, where's the chat history live? Like, where's the context? Like, do I create a session and then OpenAI keeps that session and I just keep interacting with it? Or in this case, they've actually taken the really simple but genius path of you just send the entire conversation context each time you make a call. So you just have this ever-growing large HTTP request with a larger and larger body with your entire chat history. And the reason it's so brilliant is it means you can modify that. You can add in additional context. So there might be one use case we had at Splash is we were trying to, like, let's make a song, but as a conversation. And so we would feed extra metadata into these calls to OpenAI, where we'd be like, okay, so the sample that you've generated is in like D minor at 140 BPM. The user doesn't need to know that, but the backend needs to know that. And so we could feed all of this extra data in, and then it could come back to us and use the functions and say, okay, this person wants to generate a new song, but they want 160 BPM this time instead of 140 BPM. And so being able to control that, you control what the user sees, and that so you can strip out all that additional context, but you can add it in so the AI can make intelligent decisions based on your conversation history. All right, so we've got our response back, and we're going to throw that into a bot message. I do love this, though. Whoever thought of this for the response, they just updated this. And so responses come back as like a list, and then you've got content maybe, and then you've got another list. And it is the worst data structure to unpack. And again, another reason why I wanted to use live templates instead of trying to type it out, because I did it about 6 times and I got it wrong every single time. And, yeah, exhibit exists. That's right. So we got our bot message, we added in, and we set back to idle. So let's just clear here. Let's make sure this worked. And hold on, I'll just do a reload. Okay, and so quiero practicar español contigo. So I'm saying I want to practice Spanish with you. All right, and we now have a conversation starting. So the final step is let's make it talk. And so this final step is amazing, and I'll get back into, like, I couldn't use, when I agreed to do this talk, I couldn't use OpenAI for everything. I was using 11 Labs for voice generation as that final step. And I have a slide at the end to talk about the economics and what OpenAI has managed to do. But it's also just much easier to use. You know, you've only got one API key. The billing system of OpenAI is easier than others. And yeah, I'll come back to that. I'm getting off topic. So let's pull up the talk stage. No, speak. All right, and again, another simple API call. We're using the TTS1 model. There's a HD one as well, but TTS1 is fast, it's cheap, and honestly, the quality is so good. I haven't seen a need for using the HD version of it yet. I have 8 different voices. I've just chosen Shimmer because I thought it was a cool name. And it makes it really easy. You just give it a directory and the file name, and it'll give you back the file ready to throw into a player. All right, let's try again. And hola, quiero practicar español contigo. Come on.
Hola, claro, estoy aquí para ayudarte a practicar español. ¿En qué puedo ayudarte?
And that's literally it. Like, that is done. And so you have a look, this file is 181 lines of code. Now, there is some scaffolding that I've thrown in, but very little. Like, I have this utility file for adding spacing in, and I have a snack file, which just like the scaffold messenger, which puts the snack bars. The bars just really boilerplatey, and so I just have like a really simple wrapper over the top of that. But even with those, it's probably still less than 300 lines of code. So, no, thank you, and it worked. Thank you, Matthew. All right, cool. So I'm going to switch back to my slides. Let's go back to present. Yeah, I actually really like it. So we'll go to where to next. How am I doing for time? Am I get a time check? I'm doing all right.
20 minutes to go.
Oh, man, nailed it. All right. So where to next? So this is really simple. This was, again, when I sat down to do this, I'm like, actually, like, it took me a while the first time, and I made a lot of mistakes. And obviously, like, I iterated on this about 6 times to get it down to its simplest form. But even if you took out all the boilerplate, if you were familiar with the OpenAI APIs and Flutter, you could do this in less than an hour. And what I love about it is, and I've talked to a few of you about this, like the idea of, as a software developer, being able to solve a problem for yourself is brilliant. So I have an app that's not much more complicated than this on my phone, and I use it all the time. I just, if I want to practice my Portuguese, I just do it. I can sit down, and what I do is I listen to a podcast, and then they'll have, because I don't have like lessons or anything like that in it, but I do Duolingo, and so that'll teach me new words, or I'll listen to a podcast, and that'll do new words, and they'll be like, all right, I need to practice those words. So I just jump over, clear my conversation history, and practice talking. And yeah, again, it just blows my mind. Like, yeah, just such a simple thing that we can do to make our lives better in very little code. Okay, so the hands-free with a trigger word is a really interesting one. Now, has anybody got ChatGPT Plus here? Hands? Have you tried it on the app where there's the hands-free mode? It's pretty cool. It's not great for language learning, though, because when you're learning a second language, you pause a lot. You're like, I don't know the word. And so as soon as it hears a pause, it says, oh, you've finished talking, and then tries to talk back to you. It is infuriating. So I end up like making noises. I'll be like, just to keep it going so it doesn't actually start the chat interaction. Yeah, true, yeah. In my house, if you stop talking, that is permission for somebody else to start talking. And I've noticed Colombians as well, they'll do that. They'll insert filler words instead of silence because they know as soon as they stop, somebody else will start. But like it's pretty good for language learning when you can have it, but the hands-free mode isn't great. I actually think the way that they do that in ChatGPT is they create a WebSocket connection directly. They stream audio up. They have local on-device silence detection to tell you when it starts and stops. And then they just do it all on a single server, which is great. So we've done a lot of round trips here, whereas they can just be in a single environment, get the text in, transcribe it, do it all, push it all back to you, and they stream it back to you as well. So again, that's great when it works. WebSockets drop out a lot, so you end up getting like a lot of reconnections. And it's also very server intensive. So, if you get overloaded, then everything drops out. The other problem from a language learning perspective is I need to see the text. Like, I don't always understand what it's telling me in Portuguese. And so I want to see what it's told me back. And so I can look at it and then maybe go and look up a word and find context and other things like that. So the ChatGPT app is great, and it's a huge step forward, but this is actually still really useful in some contexts. In terms of hands-free, I would prefer a trigger word where I could just say, it's like Google, Siri, and Alexa. I'll try not to trigger everybody's devices, but some sort of trigger word where I can say, all right, I'm talking now. And then another trigger word like over and out or something like that at the end. And then it'd know that I'm actually finished the conversation. And so both Apple and Google have very good monolingual models on their phones. And so it'd be kind of a switch where you could just, whatever language your phone is in, so if it's in Spanish or Portuguese or English, pick a phrase, open your app, make sure it runs in the background, turn on the microphone, and just wait for that trigger phrase. And then you can kick it over, record it, send it off to Whisper, so you get the multilingual support. And then when it comes back, switch it back over again. I haven't got to trying this yet, but I'm pretty confident that will work. Yeah, touch wood. I really wished I had time to get to that before this talk, but it's yes, didn't quite get there. Another thing that I have in my version of this is I've sped up responses by chunking the data. So if I get quite a long paragraph back from OpenAI, it takes quite a lot of time to turn that into text. And so I have a fancy regex that GPT-4 helped me write, where I split by sentence, and then I send each sentence off to the text-to-speech model one by one, and then I can start playing them as soon as they come back. And so I have basically an audio queue. I split it off by sentence. I go and generate one by one. It then splits them into the queue. And because now I have them in sentence blocks, I can highlight the specific sentence that's being said. And so that's better than having a big block, right? Because it's hard to follow along when it's not your language. It's not quite as good as word by word, but it's better than a whole like having a whole block or a whole paragraph. Plus, it means you get feedback immediately. And it feels more like a conversation when you're not having to wait 1 to 2 minutes per interaction. And sometimes ChatGPT will just give you this massive dialogue, and you don't know until you've got it back. So yeah, I've looked to see if there's like SRT file generation, but both 11 Labs and ChatGPT, and OpenAI don't give you, so SRT subtitle files. You can use the Whisper model to generate those, but that adds another step. So you'd have to, and I don't think the Whisper API does it. So effectively, if you wanted to highlight word by word, I haven't found a way of doing that yet. I was wondering if you could basically look at the length of the file, count the number of words, and then roughly work out which word to highlight at a time. And because you're doing it sentence by sentence, the drift wouldn't be too much. The problem with that is it doesn't count for cadence. So it could get out. Yeah, I haven't got to testing that yet. So I talked about the power of ChatGPT functions, and I suppose my other point here is this really isn't limited to language learning. This is my personal use case, and so that's obviously why I've built it. But this technology and how easy it is to integrate into a Flutter app, pretty much any app. Like the JavaScript SDK is amazing. You could use that on React Native. I'm sure the Android and iOS integrations wouldn't be too bad as well if in native land. Like with just a couple API calls, you can add just an insane amount of powerful functionality to your app. So I worked at a life admin at Eggy before I became a contractor. And they spent quite a lot of money and quite a bit of time trying to scan a receipt and parse out all of the important information so they could then put it in their database and generate reminders and just basically help you organize your life. That's just, again, insanely simple to do now. You grab the photo, you can add it as an attachment to your call to ChatGPT. It'll recognize it. And then you just have a prompt that says, okay, give me all the important information, and I want it back in this specific JSON structure. That's like 50 lines of code, tops, to take the picture, grab it, send it to ChatGPT, bring it back, get some structured data, throw it in a database somewhere, maybe set some reminders. It's like the functions interface is also, when Pat and I were working on it, they didn't have the functions interface. So we would come up with this fancy JSON, fancy prompts to get it to respond in specific JSON structure so that we could say, you know how to do these things. Based on this dialogue, tell us what you think the user wants to do. And so it would come back with a JSON structure and a command and some data for that. And then we would take that, look at the command, and pipe it into some existing function. And so there were so many people doing this that OpenAI supported it natively. And now you can reliably get back JSON bodies with your commands and pipe that into specific function calls. And so, you can build your own assistant better than Google Assistant probably still is now, and better than Siri. Like, you'd be like, add a to-do to my to-do list, and it'll work out, okay, to-do is a function they can do, and here's the body of that to-do. And so, it's super powerful what you can do with these APIs, like on top of language learning, and how easy it is to get it into an existing app. For the Eggy use case, I just thought it'd be great. Like, everything about me. Why don't you just have a look at all that data and give me back some useful insights? You can just pipe it all into ChatGPT and give it back. It could give you some commands, or it could be my useful assistant. Like, I'm dragging my son along in one hand. I've only got one other hand. I could talk to it to add a calendar event or, yeah. And so obviously this is coming around more and more, but I just wanted to highlight the simplicity of it. Cool. We didn't end up back in. All right, so let's get to the economics of this. Now, when I started building this, I was dead set. Like, I've been looking for a business that I can build myself, like myself and my wife. We started our consulting company together, and we're like, okay, we want to build some sort of SaaS product that we're passionate about and that we can, like build out our own product eventually. And so this, I'm really passionate about language learning. I really enjoy it. I'm like, you know what? This is it. This is my product. I'm going to start building this. It's actually a lot simpler than I thought it was going to be. Let's do it. It's economically, when I started this, I couldn't find a way to make it viable. So if you have a look, the pre-OpenAI dev day, 11 Labs is the voice provider, and their voices are even better than the OpenAI ones. They're like less accent. They've got a bigger variety. They also have more functions, like more functionality. Like you can train custom voices and things like that, but expensive. So I have to pay a $22 a month USD subscription just to get enough to get 2 hours of generated audio. Now, that's not 2 hours of conversation, it's about 4 hours of conversation. And so with my rough math, I'm thinking, okay, it cost me about $6 an hour American just for the speech generation of 1 hour of conversation. Now, GPT-4, again, you kind of need that to have real conversation. So that was costing me about $1 an hour for conversation. And then this really makes sense as a mobile app. I tried to think of ways that this would make more sense on web, and I just couldn't, because you've got your phone in your pocket, you're going to be sitting on the sofa practicing your language. It's very unlikely you're going to go and get your laptop out. So it makes sense as a mobile app. But you add the Google Play tax and the Apple Store App Store tax on that, and we're talking $10 USD an hour cost to use this. So how do you even charge a subscription for that? Like, the standard subscription for a language learning app is something between $8 and $20 a month. Now, how can I be 10x more expensive than that? And like maybe it's possible, and maybe there's a way as a marketer you can sell that. It's probably still cheaper than getting a tutor locally in Australia. Like a tutor in Australia is going to cost you $20-30 an hour, but I can get an actual Brazilian tutor online for $6 USD an hour. So the economics it just broke my brain. Like, I actually can't make this work. Or I'd have to charge like $15 an hour. And then you've got microtransactions, which means people are having to keep topping it up as opposed to just a standard subscription, which has its pros and cons. When OpenAI Dev Day happened, I don't know, about a month ago now, that really did change the game, because the OpenAI TTS, text-to-speech, is 50 cents an hour for conversation, roughly, compared to $6 an hour. And they decreased the price of GPT-4 with GPT-4 Turbo by 2 to 3 times. And so even with the App Store tax, we're now talking about $1.50 an hour. And now we're in the realms of something that could actually be made into a business. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting, because it's really like it's very easy to get excited about, I'm just going to use these AI techs and build this amazing app. But then when you actually look at the economics, it can add up really quickly. And so it's something that as a developer I hadn't really thought about until starting to go down that thought process of, oh, I want to turn this into a business. And then you look at it and you're like, I can't turn this into a business right now. This is a personal app just for me. And I'll get up at DevFest and tell everybody how I made it. Yeah, cool. All right. Yes.
How do you deliver this? It's like you create your AI helper, and then the users connect to your own AI helper, or it's more like every account connects with its own ChatGPT bot?
Pretty much, yeah. So if you were delivering this, right, you download it from the App Store, just like the ChatGPT app, and then you effectively have your own AI helper on your phone. You would need to do a lot more to be able to sell this, right? You're going to need user authentication, probably some sort of data persistence layer. Just something to provide a little bit more of an experience than just this very simple app that, although it solves a purpose, solves my purpose, to get other people to buy it, there's that expectation around, I probably want to be able to see my previous chats, or I probably want to have like a list of vocabulary that I've learned, things like that. So does that answer your question, Mark? Yeah, exactly, yeah. And billing, right? You actually have to work out billing. And I love mobile development. I loathe the Google Play Store and the App Store. I think that they are killing the ecosystem because of how restrictive things are and how expensive things are. Like, I love mobile app development. I do not want to publish another app on the Google Play Store or the App Store. There's just too many hurdles. The iteration cycle is really slow. Just to publish an app, you're going to spend half a day going through the question and privacy questionnaires that they've got, which changes every so often. So it's not like you can even learn which answers you're going to have to do because they'll change it between one app to the next. So yes, that's like a problem that I'm grappling with at the moment, because this, if I was going to build this, it does make sense for the mobile app. It's like, do I really want to go through the pain? Yeah, if you're a large company, it's fine. You have somebody dedicated, their life is to deal with the Google Play Store. That's fine. You don't have to deal with it. You don't have to think about it. But as a solo dev, you're basically tripling your work. You've got 3 different app stores to deal with, or you have to pay for revenue cap, which is like an abstraction layer over all 3 of them. That's better than dealing with the stores individually. I've used revenue cap recently, and it was a pretty decent experience considering how bad it is for each of the stores. Anyway, I could rant on that for a while. I'm going to stop and move over to Q&A. Yes.
I would love to actually do mine.
Sure.
English is my second language.
Yep.
I'm still public speaking is something that's part of my job. And I was just wondering, like, do you think it could cater different needs from like your beginner and your like next level?
Yeah, I've been trying it to improve my Spanish in professional circumstances as well. And it is pretty good because like it understands what you're saying. And then you could be like, okay, I'm giving a speech. I want to sound like a professional working in the IT sector. And so it will then give you ideas on how you can phrase things, or you can actually walk through and practice more complicated phrases and learn new words that way. I'd actually say it's probably even better because you're not stumbling over your words as much. It's like you're just trying to improve your vocabulary. And so you'll understand more what's being said. So yeah, it definitely does work. Even ChatGPT is actually, the ChatGPT implementation, if you're paying like your $20 USD a month for the ChatGPT app, for the conversation side of things there, when you're quite fluent, that's also a really good option. The only problem is you can't see the text. You've got to kind of back out, see what's being said if you want to pick out specific words and jump back in again.
The second thing is, like, during the conversation, I think there'd be like a lot of smart information in that. Should I worry about that? So,
Yeah, I can't answer that one for you. So if you're using the API, it doesn't go through training. It's so otherwise big businesses would not use this because they wouldn't want to give up their, all of their secrets. But if you use the $20 a month one or the free one, you are giving away everything that you put in there. Now, whether or not individual people are going to look at that or if it's just getting fed into a larger data set, we don't know. And it's rare that it overfits so much that it'll give out your exact data, but it's...
Some people cracked it and they spit out the training.
Oh, right. Yes, I did see that.
Keys and stuff like Steam card keys and whatever. There were,
Exactly.
yeah, it was
He
out.
could
Yeah.
do that and then they fixed it very quickly.
They did,
yeah.
So
Yeah, it's...
figured out.
Yeah, I don't worry about it too much, but
Looking forward to it. It's on
Oh, cool.
the number one user.
Thank you. Yes,
I have a
Mohammed.
question. Actually, this one not on OpenAI, but actually Flutter.
Yeah.
How was your Flutter development journey? How did you start? And could you explain maybe what are some of the things that you would like give tips to like someone that is beginning their Flutter development journey?
Yeah, sure. How much time have I got, Ryan?
Time for one more answer.
Okay, so just this one? All right, okay, you got in there. So for me, I like to choose the right tool for the job. And so when I started at Splash last time, the reason I decided on Flutter was because we didn't know if Android or iOS was the right platform to target. We just had no idea. And I also did a prototype on it, and I could get amazing frame rates in effectively what was an app with very little optimization. And so the way I learned it to answer that question was I had a problem to solve, and I just jumped in and started hacking away at it. And so that's generally my answer to most people on how to get into something is if you have a problem to solve, that's find a problem to solve and find a technology you can use to solve that problem and just start doing it. And then especially now with ChatGPT, it won't get you all the way there. It's not going to write all the code for you, but man, it's like having a senior developer right beside you that can at least point you in the right direction if you ask the right questions. And so I would say just iterate, like hit a wall. I don't know how to do this. Go and find a tutorial that explains it. Do enough of the tutorial to help you solve that problem. Get back, keep solving the problem. Forget clean code, forget tests, forget all of it, solve a problem for you, and that will be your motivation to keep going, because then you have a real driver. It's like, this is the thing that I want, or this is the thing that I need for my job. And I'm just going to keep going at it until I get it there. The thing that really trips up people when learning languages, or especially early on, is university drives into you performance and architecture. And these aren't necessarily bad things, but they are terrible when you're building an app just for you or you're learning a new technology. Because you get that analysis paralysis of like, where do I put this file? Or, what names? I need to write 25 tests for this thing that I'm probably going to delete tomorrow because it doesn't work the way that I thought it would. So,
Built by Google, and they've got lots of code labs and things.
yeah, the code labs, you're right, actually, that's a really good. There is an introduction code lab that's actually pretty great that takes you through getting started on that. Open source projects is another one as well. I worked in a lot of companies by myself early on, and my mentoring would come from like finding some open source project, tearing it to pieces, finding how it worked, and learn a whole bunch in the way.
Thanks so much.
We're good?
We're done, yes.